I want to kind of start here with it though, Mo. What should the criteria be? Because I feel like this becomes the hard part in these conversations. You can make cases and good cases for any of these guys, and they're all gonna eventually make it. Like that, this list is just gonna get smaller and smaller, and then eventually that's the person. I assume at some point, once newer players become Hall of Fame eligible, or there's gonna be a new crop, probably
Right.
once they get more through this list, and that's fine. But what should the criteria be? Because I feel like that's what we more end up fighting about when people debate this than the validity of cases. Like everybody has a case here for different reasons.
Yeah, I mean it's not unlike voting in the real world where everybody has their own criteria, right? And so I've looked at this through three different lenses. One is statistical superiority, right? So that to me was always where the case with Chad started. He was a statistically superior player. So is Corey Dillon. The all-time leading rusher in franchise history. He's probably not going to be knocked off that perch anytime soon. And I also think from him, there is something about, like, he was the only reason to watch a lot of really bad teams. He had 2 record-setting games if you're going by statistics, which obviously with offensive linemen is a little bit more difficult. Defensive players is a little bit different than obviously if you're talking about an offensive guy who's putting up numbers, but there's statistical superiority. Then there's, okay, well, who do I most identify with team success? Well, then you don't really talk about Corey first. All of those other guys, if I'm not mistaken, either played at least in the playoffs, and in the majority of those cases, they played in the Super Bowl. And in Jim Breach's case and Chris Collinsworth's case, they played in 2. So do you value a level of team success? I think that's fair. And I've looked at this through those lenses because that's what people have told me. Different people have told me how they look at this. Some will just say, look, I want to put the guys who are at the top of different all-time leaderboards. I want to put those guys in first. Okay. And then the Corey Dillon argument, which kind of came to a head last year. I had callers on my show say, like, yeah, great player, but they never won with him. And so I want to put guys in first that achieve something on their teams with their teammates. Fine. Then to me, there's the third one. You talked about, well, they're all going to get in eventually. This is where I've changed. Ken Riley going into the Hall of Fame last year changed this for me because I'm thrilled that he got in. His son's speech was terrific. The accolades that Ken has been given after his death have been well received. They're overdue. This includes the Ring of Honor. You've had a chance to talk to Ken's son. I have. Very impressive guy. Extraordinarily proud of his dad. I watched that Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and I watched Ken go into the Ring of Honor, and the subtext was sadness because he wasn't there. I want to avoid that. So my criteria is, if we're going to agree that these guys are all going to get in, Lamar Parrish is 76 years old. If we think he's going to get in, let's not wait. I don't know anything about Lamar's health. I hope he lives to be 150 years old. Bob Trumpy is in his 70s. So I start there. I want to avoid we put a guy in and he's not here for it, because I think it's great the Bengals are doing the Ring of Honor. I love how they're doing the voting. But I think it's a stain on the organization that they waited so long to do a Ring of Honor that Ken Riley wasn't alive when he got inducted. I want to avoid that. Can't go back in time and undo that. So that I really lean toward the older players. But I'll say the same thing about this year's group as I did last year's. To me, there are 10 guys on the ballot and 1 guy who should be in the Ring of Honor. Dave Lapham was drafted by this franchise 50 years ago. It will be an embarrassment if this, for me at least, if this process comes and goes and he's not one of the 2. And I said this last year, I'll double down on it. I wish the Bengals would just say, Dave's going in. He's in the Ring of Honor. Vote for another guy. Vote for 2 others. Heck, we're going to do 2 Ring of Honor nights. One is laps and the other belongs to the other 2 you vote in. If he's not one of the 2 this year, I think I said this on my show and I'll say it here. I think people who voted for others that on a ballot that doesn't include lap should be embarrassed.
Yeah.
Any other franchise would have him in, and I think it's unfair to put him on that list with those players because Lap, I think, would admit a good player, a versatile player, played in the Super Bowl, but maybe not on the same level as Dave Fulcher, Tim Krumrie, etc. But okay, fine. Take his playing career, which was substantial and long and successful, and add it to what he's meant as a broadcaster, an ambassador, a storyteller. Alan Cutler used to call him Mr. Bengal. It's been 50 years since he was drafted. It's not been 50 continuous years, obviously, but the overwhelming majority of those years, Dave Lapham has had a very public association with the Bengals. First team, all good guy. So my first take was, even before I saw this year's ballot, was for me, it's Lapham, and then who else? And I arrived at Lamar Parrish because I'm leaning toward the older guys. I feel very strongly about this with Lap, though. If this comes and goes and he's not in, something went horribly wrong, and the Bengals would then have the power to rectify it.
And what better chance? What better? We always look for these moments, for these timestamps, right? 50 years ago, you drafted Dave Lapham in the 3rd round in 1974. He's here. He has been dedicated to this franchise ever since. What better opportunity than right now to do it when you make the announcement? Here's the 2 you voted in, and for 50 years, Dave Lapham's going in with them. And that's this year's class. Like, I don't it's such a layup. It's such a layup.
Yeah. I mean, I joked in my show the other day. I said, if you're the Bengals, rig the voting. If you're not willing to do it the way that we suggested, rig the voting. Like, if
they can do it any way they want to, they made it up in the first place.
No question. I mean, you could just decide, look, some other game this year, we're putting Dave Lapham in. And that way, if you want to put, let's say it's Lamar Parrish and Corey Dillon or whoever, these 2 guys get their night, Dave gets his, awesome. It's find me someone of his stature with another franchise that's not honored in a concrete way, whether it's Ring of Honor, Team Hall of Fame, whatever it is. I think it's embarrassing that he's not in already.
Yeah.
I think it is going to be just a shame if we're celebrating Ring of Honor night on September the 23rd and Dave is in the broadcast booth as it happens. And that is no knock on anybody else. I can make a case for any one of the 10 other guys. I love this process. I love these discussions, but this is very easy. I mean, this is very easy. And I really hope that if there are people watching or listening to this who have the ability to vote, you're going to lose me if Dave Lapham's not one of your 2. So let's do the right thing.
Okay.